Hello, Cooper here. This is part 2 of our season finale. But guess what? We have escaped the retro orchard and are not recording in front of a live studio audience currently. But we are recording remotely, mysteriously, at a location perhaps near you. Apples have to travel.
We sure do. So having got that out of the way, keep your eyes peeled and your ears and antennas tuned in. Here's part 2 of our season finale, Miami Vice.
This week on the Caramel Apples podcast, we're picking up on the continuation of part 2 of Miami Vice. We'll be again talking about the deeply captivating characters, highlights, and backstory of this resplendent sunshine noir with its raw 80s aesthetic, cutting-edge music video style cinematography, and nostalgic memories that stood out as unique and still stands the test of time. Join Kennedy and myself as we dive into this week's Orchard Trek. And now, here's part 2 of Miami Vice.
So, Coop, I recently saw this quote from something, and I can't off the top of my head remember from where.
Big surprise, Kennard.
Yeah, no, seriously though. It was powerful and really resonated. It said, "The strongest people are the ones who face their fear every day and say, 'Not today.'" I believe that is supremely fitting to apply that to our continuation discussion on Miami Vice this week.
That is crazy powerful. Nice, very interesting quote shared there. So with that fresh in mind, let's get back into our exciting Orchard Trek retro.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Me too.
How about you? I was going to say, our dear listeners, are you ready to dive back in? I so enjoyed talking about Miami Vice in last week's episode, and we in essence just dipped our toes into the matter of where we're barely scratched the surface on all the wonderful components contained therein. So this week is set to be exciting indeed.
Facts, Coop. I too love Miami Vice. I really do. Miami Vice is really one of the best media, pop culture offerings to demonstrate and show us what the 80s was truly about. Once again on this week's Retro Trek, we can again get an up-close and personal look inside this edgy nighttime series play out in order to appreciate this strange but fascinating retelling vision of what went down in the tropical heat of Miami.
Yes, as well as the interesting fashion statement at the time and the oh-so-80s music.
Yes.
This angle was so pivotal in how Miami Vice came together and played out in real time. It was cutting edge, the coolest of the coolest. A must-see for those easily fascinated by 80s aesthetics. With plenty of substance and style, Miami Vice introduced us to some of the best writing ever found in a TV series.
Oh, yeah. And some of the episodes are actually very deep, slow, and contemplative, focusing much more on building a cool atmosphere to fall into rather than just get stuck on endless action scenes. Mm-hmm. I mean, just think of any given action type show or movie now in current times. I know, Coop. Yes, we roll our eyes.
As you usually state, Kennard, facts.
Double facts.
So, in Miami Vice, you can readily see cool designs, cool clothing, fashion, and cool architecture, aka Art Deco, cool attitudes, scenarios, cars, boats, and as mentioned before, listening to cool music, in which a lot of music was deeply captivating, including the oh-so-nostalgic vintage retro synths.
So I gather you would describe Miami Vice as cool, Coop?
Oh, hush up, Kennard. And to answer your question, yes, it was very, very cool.
I'm just razzing you, sis. I'm kidding. I 110% agree that Miami Vice, being the epitome of cool, is quite the understatement. Now, the series holds up in so many different areas, many of the things you just mentioned, but this nitty-gritty was held within the precise character portrayals. Watching the characters in this retro gem is still just as endearing as it was watching it fresh back in the day. We can watch Crockett and Tubbs all day. They were the very essence of all things suave and cool.
I concur, Kennedy. The excitement and gritty nature of what went down on their beat was the stuff that drew the audience in. Right from the jump in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
The first season has its faults, though, as most series, start out. They got to get the training wheels off. But such as many being the abrupt cutting shots between scenes due to planned advertisements and commercials.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we see that happen all the time as we're streaming something or watching our favorite programming on social media or online nowadays.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so annoying. But the editing was a lot more primitive and rough around the edges back then.
Oh, yeah.
So not only in Miami Vice, but found also in most of the retro shows and movies back then.
So true, Cooper. It seemed at times the writers and or the creative execs didn't seem to know how to finish a scene before the next one. As many with the shows back then, as you just stated. So it wouldn't be much of a stretch to learn of younger, newer generations tuning into Miami Vice. They find this a little jarring and frustrating and, trying to keep up. But there's still no doubt they'll be entertained. Especially if they're avid retro buffs.
Remember how back in those shows they would play the entire song of something?
That was Miami Vice. They did not know what editing meant.
They're like, we're going to make it fit this entire song. The scene will play out for the next 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah. And fade out, too. Fade out was a little rough around the edges. It was like they're talking and the music is blasting at the same time. You're like, which way do I go? Dialogue, music, dialogue, music.
It was clunky.
Yes, it was.
The first season has some rough episodes, but of the 22 total episodes, there were few and far between. The characters are great. The acting is decent for the most part. Mm-hmm. And the meeting of both leads is great, being Sonny Crockett, who was a former football player, Vietnam vet, now undercover detective. Then we have Ricardo Tubbs, a New York City cop, who heads south to Miami in order to find the man responsible of killing his brother and, to avenge his death. So right from the jump, this was the setup in the pilot episode to get our main lead actors to cross paths.
Brilliant.
Mm-hmm. As was mentioned, Ricardo Tubbs hails from New York City, so it is inevitable Tubbs ends up staying to become Crockett's partner. Hence began one of the greatest TV detective partnerships.
Yes, and this is kind of a spoiler. If you're not super familiar with the context of what Miami Vice had, the plot episode was pretty much the whole premise of the show. So, they had that connection, and it kind of got lost in other seasons. They really hammered it. Season 1, Season 2, and it was good. It was captivating. It was drama. And here's the spoiler. It was the drug kingpin, Calderon. They were after him.
Yeah.
So, it did kind of open up to more edgy, drug-related or seedy related scenarios, and it kind of got away from the Calderon thing, but that's what started it. And it was on the edge of your seat type entertainment. Just like it was, you were captivated. Yeah, so, that's one of the most standout things of the show is the vibe that Crockett and Tubbs put into Miami Vice. So you just mentioned Tubbs is from New York City, so
Right.
he had this kind of streetwise, tough exterior. Yeah, he was a cop, but he just had that edge about him where I'm on my job, I'm on my beat, but then he's like, don't mess with me either. Like, he did kind of act very New York, like, he even got Crockett's face a couple times. He was like, look here, and Crockett's like, okay.
Message received.
Yeah, he's like, suck eggs, pal. Yeah, Crockett said that a couple times. People too. I don't know. He had a little bit of an attitude at times, but it was very enjoyable. But yeah, Tubbs was suave. I don't know. He had a swagger that I don't think has been emulated, even in current programming or anything in the recent past.
I'd agree. Yeah, he's very much himself. Like,
yes.
he brought himself into the character.
Yeah, and you can't fake that. So, okay, so he was acting, but was that some of Philip Michael Thomas too? He's like, you got me. So you will like me, whatever.
Yes.
All right, you can go pound sand. Suck eggs, pal. Thanks, Crockett. We needed Crockett's input too. But most of the episodes in the show follow these two. So it's really good to watch their friendship grow through good times and bad times. It is of no secret that all throughout Miami Vice, that they had a chemistry that explained their friendship, through the difficult times especially. So when watching so many of these episodes, you felt like you were right there with them, sharing in the triumphs and challenges presented. Miami Vice really was a superb show.
Yeah. So as we've already set up, Crockett and Tubbs are supposed to be undercover cops, detectives, posing as wealth-like peacocks. The storylines were usually well-written and quite captivating, especially in the first 2 seasons.
Yes.
We witnessed the gritty realism that Miami Vice had to offer.
Miami Vice portrayed a real street presence. Miami effortlessly provided the proper location ambience needed to convey the adventures Crockett and Tubbs often found themselves in. The style and panache of Crockett and Tubbs sums it up. But that's not to say the locations, storylines, and characters are not without a dark side. They really explored and hit on deep, dark, heavy topics such as kidnapping, murder, prostitution, and drugs, to name a few.
Yeah, and these specific touchy topics may have been sanitized slightly due to censorship of the time, but there's enough to give it a dark grittiness to make it edgy, especially for that time. Mm-hmm. Hence the late night time slot it came on. Mm-hmm. I think it came on like around 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
I think you're right. Yeah, it was a late slot.
Yes, kitty's in bed.
Miami Vice was one of NBC's biggest hits of the mid-'80s, and it continued to remain so until the end of the decade. This show was a Friday night institution and staple for 5 years of its entire run, and it went up against some tough, heavy competition at the time. So if you came up during this time, you think of the likes of nighttime soaps like, oh my goodness, Dallas, Dynasty, Falcon Crest.
Oh my goodness, just hearing those shows were so 80s. Yeah. Our grandmama, she loved her some nighttime soap, so didn't she?
She really did. I don't know, Cooper. Television offerings were seemingly better back when we were coming up. Mm-hmm. That's probably just chalked up to nostalgia, though.
Yeah, because that's the whole thing about nostalgia. You tend to bleed out the bad, and keep the good. Yeah. That's why people like it.
I think that is like a major argument, one way or the other. Like some people are like, oh, you're just... whatever, just let us enjoy it, because nostalgia is great. Yes. But like in bringing some of these other shows up, like you said, it just made us think of our grandma. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to believe that so many years have passed, that, being Gen Xers, That is our reality nowadays, unfortunately.
Sadly.
So miss our grandma. She was simply amazing and so adorable and lovable.
I know, Kennedy. And as you said, talking about things from our retro past really brings up nice memories of better times and of some of the dearest people we've loved.
Agreed.
And that's why talking about all these nostalgic things, is so very nice and it's appropriate. Mm-hmm. But back on topic, back to Miami Vice.
Yes, Miami Vice. It's just as entertaining today as it was back then. The pulse and rhythm of a glamorous tropical resort mecca, that of Miami, Florida, was juxtaposed against the seamy haunts of the drug underworld in this edgy action series, which amplified what was going down as it made heavy use of rock music backgrounds and musical video effects to drive those raw scenarios home. Not to mention some of the most underbelly content ever conceived for television. All this happened on Miami Vice. The creative execs eased by with this since it was shown once again in a late night time slot.
And speaking of the music showcased throughout Miami Vice, the ever-present stylish MTV-themed inclusion influenced, it's all over aura and vibe, as well as the music by composer Jan Hammer. Mm-hmm. It was a smash hit.
Very signature.
Yes. And Jan Hammer credited executive producer Michael Mann with allowing him the creative freedom in scoring the series, including the show's title theme intro, at the beginning, which actually charted high on the Billboard charts of 1985.
Not surprised.
Isn't that crazy, though? A theme song?
Yeah, but not surprised.
Not surprised. Not surprised at all. And Miami Vice transformed both struggling actor Don Johnson into a major sex symbol and made Philip Michael Thomas, who was, as I believe, an unknown actor at the time.
Yeah.
Made him a bona fide heartthrob of fans.
Oh, yeah.
So Miami Vice ushered these two into stardom beyond their wildest imaginations, with the exciting soundtrack of key pop new wave music being a huge part of that shift. Fun fact, did you know that while other TV shows at the time used made-for-TV music, Miami Vice would spend, get this, $10,000 or more per episode to buy the rights to the original recordings.
That's cheap. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Let me check my little change purse here. Getting a song played on Miami Vice was a boost to record labels and artists.
Oh, yeah. I think that was a nice added touch that made the series stand out as so memorable. It also would be an understatement to say how Crockett's look had a significant influence on and generated a monumental fashion trend for all of the eager common Joe Schmo followers who were into imitating his macho but disheveled look. It was very Miami for certain, and then we have Ricardo Tubbs as our total 180 opposite of Crockett. He was sporting a clean-cut look, but who was always armed with weapons and or swagger, his fresh mouth, for any situation that came up. He usually did the honors to sometimes bail Sonny out of tight problems with some ruthless drug lord or murderer or whatever. Just another day going down on Miami Vice.
And we mentioned how Miami Vice 2 showcased songs, talent from key celebrities from, that decade, such as Ted Nugent, Phil Collins.
Oh, here we go, yes!
Peter Gabriel, Tina Turner, Bruce Willis, Meatloaf, El DeBarge. Are you keeping track of all these?
Yeah, wonders, right? These are just great.
I know, right?
Yeah.
There's also Glenn Frey. Even the likes of rappers such as the Fat Boys.
I remember them. I remember their episode.
Yeah. So, fun fact. Creative execs even got Lee Iacocca, CEO of the Chrysler Corporation in the 80s, to make a cameo appearance in one of the series' pivotal episodes. Wow. Talk about big names. How's that for some clout?
That's pretty impressive right there, Coop.
Yeah.
I mean, even after Miami Vice being viewed through 80s rose-colored glasses, it still encapsulates an awesomely refreshing nostalgia as we think back about some of the things we touched on in part 1. You know, like the clothes and the fashions, as you stated. The cars, the boats, the intoxicating soundtrack reigning all throughout. But the setting was ideal by filming and capturing the allure of Miami itself. Miami Vice put that city from that point on into an entirely different sphere.
I believe that too, Kennedy.
Oh, yeah.
And Miami effortlessly provided the proper location ambiance that was needed to convey the edgy adventures of Crockett and Tubbs that they often found themselves in. And you mentioned about part of Miami's allure showcased in Miami Vice was the cars and the boats.
Oh, yeah.
So, fun fact, we mentioned what Sonny Crockett drove, the Ferrari.
Yes.
But do you remember what Ricardo Tubbs drove as, you know, his flashy vehicle?
I do. I don't know exactly what it is, though. What is it?
Okay. So it was a 1964 Cadillac Coupe de Ville convertible. And I think it was a dusty gray blue hue.
Uh-huh. Yes, it was.
Like Tubbs was the one that wore the sleek Armani suits. He was quite sharp in how he, you know, comported himself.
Yep.
He was a dapper gentleman.
Yes, he was. He was. He was smooth.
He was. And letting him drive in the caddy was a nice cherry on top to roll out his character, you know. That would just round out the whole thing.
I agree.
Real quick, I have a fun fact about Sonny Crockett's boats. Yes, plural, boats, with an S. Fun fact. It is understood that Sonny Crockett lived on an Endeavor sailboat, St. Vitus Dance, along with his pet alligator. Do you remember his name? Weigh in, you Orchard Archivers, if you remember this. Hit us back.
Also, Crockett owned an uber-fast speeder cigarette boat, which I absolutely adored.
Yeah, that's like right up Kennard's alley.
Yeah, I seriously, like, if money wasn't an issue,
Yeah.
like, there are really some pretty fascinating things bouncing around out in the world.
Yeah.
You don't want much, but there are some things you're like, if I only had a couple of coins to rub together, that would be mine.
And I'm pretty sure you would have a fleet of your own.
Yes, boats with an S.
In every color.
Plural's good sometimes.
So she could dress to match, of course. So she was right. Crockett's boat was Chris Craft Stinger 390X.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, hey, is that an ode to Gen X, perhaps?
I wish. But this boat was incredibly fast and quite sizable as a 39-foot deep offshore racing boat.
OMG.
That sounds like some power there.
Oh, yeah. You can hear them
Wow.
buddies like miles away.
Jeez. And we see how fitting it is to have one of these little handy-dandy toys in his possession, right?
Yes, yes.
So, but the Stingers weren't free to use on Miami Vice, so the creative execs had to switch brands, which ushered in the Wellcraft 38 Scarab KVs for the duration of the show. The price tag on this boat in 1986 was $136,000.
That's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 86.
Mm-hmm.
Us common nobodies don't have that kind of change laying around now, currently.
No.
That's still a lot of money, yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I could just imagine with a high influence of the show that speedboat probably heightened a lot of antennas out there in TV land. What say you, Cooper?
Coop says you're correct. Fun fact. As a result of the attention the Scarab 38 KV garnered on Miami Vice, The company Wellcraft received an onslaught of orders, increasing sales by 21% in 1 year.
I can imagine. Oh my goodness.
That's serious advertisement.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
That is insane. They're like, yes, please.
Yeah, and then you got the colors and the music and all that surrounding this.
Oh, yeah.
That's one big, long, giant commercial, in video form.
Yes. Because they're like, our customers are going to picture themselves as Crockett and Tubbs doing this, and they're going to want that lifestyle. So, yeah, they're like, yes, please.
Yes, please.
We'll sign the line. We would love for you to do our ads, please. Thank you. So, in appreciation, get this, the company gave Don Johnson an exact duplicate of the boat. So, who's the real winner here?
Exactly.
He got paid for the show and got a free boat.
That's a good deal.
Yes.
Maybe we need to start our own tropical show.
We'll have to put our heads together on that.
We won't get very far, will we?
No, because I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the ocean.
Oh yes, we are complete polar opposites on that front.
But for the sake of a free boat, maybe we could do something. Let's see. So Don Johnson, he would often come arriving to work on set in his boat. Isn't that insane?
It is, and I think I would live it up that way too. In your face, suckers!
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
But talk about getting into character. How cool is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now we have Sonny racing around in his powerful speedboat. This is all justified by the fact that he needs to be able to play the role of a successful criminal for his undercover work. Hand in glove. It's stuff like this, the details, that had so many fall so hard for the show.
Yeah.
And we still talk about it even now.
Yeah. So on that, let's talk about the supporting cast for a second.
Oh yes, let's get into that.
There are in fine form as they play out their respective roles. Mm-hmm. We have Detective Gina Calabrese, played by Sandra Santiago, and Trudy Joplin, her partner. Now these two ladies made a very good team and worked very well together. It was refreshing to see them integrated into so many of the episodes, even though the main focus was still Sonny and Rico.
And it was understood that Gina and Sonny were involved romantically briefly, especially in the earlier seasons. Mm-hmm. And Trudy was for Rico, but it was never really played out or explained that way. Yeah. Just a vague understood thing. Like they were crushing on each other or something, which, it was the 80s, so it was just like, that worked.
Yeah. So they went with it.
And actually, I think if you're going to pair people up, like they were pushing Crockett, he was the star of the show. Let's just be honest.
Sure.
But I honestly think aesthetically, that Tubbs and Gina, they would have made a rocking couple. I mean, Trudy was beautiful. I mean, that's what it was. But Gina and Crockett, that's what it was. Tubbs and Gina.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they would have been a power couple. Like, they looked good together.
So are you being Chuck Woolery right now? You're like, I put this as a love connection.
Let me get back to you on that, 2 and 2. Crockett's like, don't cut me out. Suck eggs, pal.
You can have Trudy.
I think they would have worked too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love that. Mix it up.
So this is true. That they really did make episodes just for them and maybe a love interest from a supporting actor for the show.
Yeah, gotta keep it interesting.
Yeah. And we got yet another trivia question for you, our dear listeners. Do you remember what Trudy's nickname in the office given to her was? I believe it was even on her name placard on her desk.
It was.
So hit us back if you know. And then you had the comic relief and partner duo for Crockett and Tubbs, and that was Switek and Zito.
Yeah, they were the comic relief, like you said.
Yeah.
They were nuts. I always did find them entertaining, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't feel they were too much, but in later seasons, there were a couple of episodes where it solely surrounded their adventures, which I get, but let's get back to the main characters, right?
Yeah.
But I did like the two of them. I mean, I'm glad that they did have fair inclusion in Miami Vice.
Yeah.
It is said that after playing parts Detective Stan Switek and Detective Larry Zito, Michael Talbot and John Deal, respectively, they remain good friends down to this day.
Cool.
Yeah. But I really like Lieutenant Marty Castillo, played by Edward James Olmos. He was the lieutenant.
Yes. And
he was a stoic, deeply serious type of gentleman, but he had heart. He was tough nut to crack, though, and some of his standoffishness was noticeable even behind the scenes with some of the other actors. Yeah, do you want to talk about that with that was, Cooper?
Slightly. So Marty Castillo, he was one that was in command, very stern and very soft-spoken.
Uh-huh.
Now, this guy hardly says much in the show, but that's because he doesn't have to. He inherently trusts the people he commands and expects them all to do their job, which they always do.
That's a good boss. That's a good boss to have.
Yeah. I mean, shouldn't he expect that?
Yeah.
That's what they're there to do, and he's just there to make sure all the bolts and nuts are taken care of.
That's right. That's right.
So, although Edward James Olmos is quite the superb actor, both he and Don Johnson often argued during the first season due to their different acting styles.
Uh-oh.
Yes. Oopsie doopsie. So, fun fact, Olmos used his anger towards Johnson for his character and their scenes together.
Yes, I remember. I can see this in my mind's eye.
In some episodes, Lieutenant Castillo never looked at Crockett at all.
I can see this in my mind's eye. I'm serious. There were, but it was, you would not think it was because they couldn't stand each other. Like, it just brought intensity to the scenes they were in.
Right.
And they're talking about dark, deep subjects. You know, go check on this case, this, this entity there, this, and I can remember scenes where Crockett would be like, he's got the most sharp eyes. He'd be looking dead at Castillo, and Castillo wouldn't even look at him. So just what you described, and it's not just one or two episodes. Like, their vibe was, that's what it was. But it's neat to hear you explain that, because it's like, it played out on the show very crisp and clear.
And I think that's a sign of good actors.
I think so, too.
They took that raw emotion they were seriously feeling, and they were able to translate it and just made the story even better.
Yes.
Versus, being like, well, I can't even act now, I mean, they were professional about it.
Very professional, good word.
But they made it real. That's cool.
And they got paid! That's even cooler! That's crazy, Coop. Goodness. But again, we mentioned this in other episodes before, that what you've stated, the professionalism, is still very apparent in a lot of these retro offerings, even if there was tension behind the scenes. So that tension translated enough into the acting to still make the story very believable, and it drew you in. Sometimes intensity is very, very good. Miami Vice really was one of the first series to have a strong arc of character development through its run, particularly in regards to its lead characters. It says something to the realism displayed each week. Well, we got a couple more things to touch on before we wrap up this week's Orchard Retro Track. So let's do that. There were a couple of supporting characters added to the show for comic relief. Two that stands out in my mind is that Nugert Lamont. I know, a.k.a. Noogie. Oh, Coop, he was annoying too. Goodness. He was annoying. But unfortunately, he actually passed away in real life shortly after appearing in Miami Vice.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. And then there's Izzy Moreno, played by Martin Ferrero. He was quite the tool as well. So this is interesting, and he's very recognizable in another later movie. Excuse me, one of our favorite movies. So think of dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Think of the Explorers and the infamous scene. 93, a movie in 93.
Yeah, I got the movie.
Okay, who did the T-Rex go and eat when he ran from the explorers to hide from the dinosaur?
The lawyer?
That's him. That's Izzy, yeah. That's Izzy. That's the same actor.
What?
Yep, Martin Ferrero.
Got it.
So, and that shows his scope of his acting, because, you know, he played that butthole lawyer in Jurassic Park.
It is Coupon Day.
Yes. Yeah, coupon. Yeah. So both Noogie and Izzy were both dope characters that they integrated into the episodes to help Crockett and Tubbs get leads on some of the top lead bad guys of the underworld. So they do it for a price in order to help try to keep themselves out of trouble. Both were terribly annoying in my opinion, but hey, I mean, it gives a little more flair and angle to the whole story to take it away from the deep dark.
Yes, and how are our pivotal characters going to deal with these other characters?
That's true.
This shows their personality as well, how they deal with these other people.
I agree. Insufferable.
So we're turning it back over to you Orchard Archivers. What do you like and remember about Miami Vice? What were your favorite episodes, moments, songs, or anything about the fashion and relics of the show that fascinated you most? Miami Vice is such a wonderful nostalgic memory we have to reflect fondly about from better times in television's past.
Yes.
We'd love to hear your thoughts and on what you remembered about this fascinating series. Weigh in and join in our discussion this week. Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
So, Kennedy.
Yes.
What are some of your favorite songs and moments and episodes about Miami Vice?
Okay, so I know we don't have a lot of time, but just a couple of the episodes that I really liked. My absolute favorite ones in season 2, Sons and Lovers.
Mm.
That's the one, and I like the one that connected it with Calderon, and that's the one with the speedboat.
Yeah.
Oh, what was the name of that? Calderon's Return, I think that was the first one at the end of season 1. Season 2, at the end of season 2, is when Tubbs meets up against, spoiler alert, sorry, with Calderon's daughter, and she had a little surprise for him, but their reunion was short-lived. The music in that one was very, oh my goodness, talk about pulling you in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's one in season 3, Forgive Us of Our Debts. Another one, oh my goodness, 5 golden apples, golden delicious apples on that one.
Wow.
Peter Gabriel sang the song in that one, the theme song for that. Oh my God. Oh, very, very cryptic, very, lack of a better, haunting.
Wow.
That's a pull that pulls you in.
Mm.
Yes.
You're like, I'm reliving it right now.
Yeah. And of course my hubby, he likes the ones with the speedboats and stuff. There's the Great McCarthy, and then there's Smuggler's Blues is his absolute favorite. He likes the pilot, all the fast cars. Yeah, so yeah, we like this show.
Well, that is so cool.
How about you, Coop?
Well, although I do remember watching Miami Vice while we were younger, I think I'm not as quite a big a fan of Miami Vice as you are, Kennedy.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, it's just like the beach and the mountains type thing. Okay.
Yes, I did enjoy the show, but to be like, okay, down to the specific episode and what they might be wearing and things like that, I couldn't really do that.
Okay, cool.
But, like, I do remember that Phil Collins... Are you surprised?
No, not at all.
Yes, so...
He did it for you, huh?
He did, yes. He made that show for me, so...
Okay, so in that one episode that I like,
yes,
The Sons and Lovers, he has a really cool song in that one.
Hey, all right.
It's called Long, Long Way to Go.
Okay.
And it's just, it fit the show. It fit that episode.
Wow.
The sadness that Tubbs was feeling because he just lost, like everything was wiped away from him. He was still reeling on the death of his brother. Like you'll have to hear that song. That song is vibe, yo.
Well, it looks like I'll just be borrowing from you your sets so I can do that.
Yes, I owe you. I'm always borrowing your stuff, so it's the least I can do, right?
Thank you in advance for letting me do that.
You're welcome. That's pretty cool, Cooper, and thanks for your honesty, because, you know, a lot of things, some things are crisper and clearer that we remember, other things not so much, you know? I mean, we don't know, we're not experts on everything 80s.
Right.
I mean, we do remember fondly and stuff. We like to share what we do remember and like.
Right.
But there's things that's not quite our jam either, so honesty is always key.
Yeah.
Honesty is key. Well, Miami Vice is definitely etched into our retro memories like forever. But as usual, Hollywood likes to grab valuable retro offerings such as Miami Vice and tried their hand at redoing and retelling stories, but with an updated flair. So I'm usually notorious for turning my nose up at a lot of remakes these days, but actually they made a cinematic version of Miami Vice that came out in 2006. So it starred Colin Farrell and Jamie Foxx. Cooper, it was just like the TV series, but updated. It had the same feel, it had great music, you name it, and it was an awesome updated version of Miami Vice. But there's a key reason as to why it turned out so well.
The feature film of Miami Vice was under the oversight and direction of genius executive producer, director Michael Mann. You think back on how the way the show felt as captured in the 80s. Michael Mann made it look more like a movie fashion filmed as a movie versus more than a TV series.
Totally. Yes, he did.
And its cinematography, motion picture shooting style, and production wardrobe design made the Hallmark trademark style come alive in Miami Vice, the film.
Okay.
And it was just as entertaining as it was, you know, that TV series back then. So the success was all mostly due to Michael Mann's vision. The man's vision is just brilliant.
It most certainly is. So what can we say about Miami Vice that hasn't already been said, except that it is one of the greatest TV shows ever made in the history of television. Quite obviously, the best season of Miami Vice is a toss-up between the first two seasons, in my humble opinion. Season 1 was the season where Vice really focused all of its episodes on real-life situations, which really happened in real time. Miami Vice started with a bang with the excellent pilot episode, and it never looked back for the duration, where it finally called it quits at season 5. But season 1 was everything that made Miami Vice what our fond memories are now.
Yeah, you know, and this really was an influential show. The atmosphere, camera angles, juxtaposition of music, and captivating scenes, drama, action. Especially in the unexpected endings, which were quite unusual, unique at the time, gave the show a unique, unruly, anarchic tone. Miami Vice has so many standout episodes. It's these special types of moments that we can memorialize in real ways. And the things we fondly remember and cherish and give space in our world to honor them.
So true, Coop. And for many, it was always must-see TV back then with its extremely high-quality production values. This series had plenty of style and substance, with some of the best writing and acting talents going.
In regards to Crockett and Tubbs, these two very different men teamed up to bring down the dark Florida crime drug world. They were well fleshed out and had lots of background story, and as stated previously, equally strong character developed throughout the series, which really helped build up a solid nostalgic TV series.
Sure did.
They had cast 2 solid leads for the role that had great on-screen charisma.
Word!
And also capable of holding their own on screen.
Miami Vice was special. It was very enjoyable to look back on, though, for we Gen Xers especially. Miami Vice was a one-of-a-kind show. Famous for its fashion, music, and glamour, it was a cop show like no other. In a nutshell, Miami Vice offered us enjoyable nostalgia, as you just said, with a bit more weight than maybe you remember. It still has the mileage for entertainment. Miami Vice was a great relic of 80s nostalgia for the people who was around in the 80s to experience the charisma and machismo that came right along with it. It portrays an 80s MTV imagination of that era. To go from where they initially called it MTV Cops during development, I know, right? Before it became Gold Coast, Gold Coast! Big no-no. 3 red X's. Now we're in Family Feud. But finally, Miami Vice. Yay!
Miami Vice.
Miami Vice is the 80s.
And that's it for this week's episode. To make sure that you never miss out on another second of our Carmelicious podcast, meet up with us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcast fix. Bye for now, and thanks so much for listening.